There we go. Right, just take a pause from the dogs for a moment. We'll go back and join Andrew shortly for race 3 there this morning at Sunderland. Hope you're enjoying that. Chance for us to catch up with Dr. George Wilson. Now, George, I haven't met before. I'm delighted to chat to him. He's coming down from John Moores University, Liverpool John Moores University. If you don't know, George has been a bit of a legend in the weighing room amongst all the jockeys there because he's been studying their exercise and nutrition now for quite a number of years. And most latterly, George, you've been helped out by the Racing Foundation as well, which has been made a massive difference since it was formed back in 2012 as a result of the proceeds of the sale of the tote. But George, I believe now that what you've been working on the last few years is going to be published very, very soon in the International Journal of Sport Nutrition and Exercise Metabolism, which I guess must be the showboating sort of publication that you'll be wanting to get involved with.
Yeah, well, morning, Mike. Yeah, it is. It's great news that we've had this 5-year longitudinal study looking at the effects of weight making and the advice we provide to jockeys, published in an international journal of such a revered standard as the RJSNEM. I can't say, I'll say that quickly. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the good journals in sports science. But yeah, it's been great because I've been doing this research for about 14 years now, Mike, and fantastic that, as you said, latterly, Racing Foundation have been funding my work for the last 5 years. So we're really, really thankful to them because without that, we wouldn't be able to do the research that we do at Liverpool John Moores University.
Yeah. And George, what was it that made you get into this? I mean, we're all amazed, aren't we, when we come into the sport of racing as to how jockeys conduct themselves, how they're able to sustain their athleticism on what seems to be a pretty basic diet. It's an extraordinarily harsh regime, but you've turned it upside down effectively, haven't you?
Yeah, well, my own background, Mike, is having watched Red Rum in the 70s when I was a kid and actually attended the Grand National. And then I went in 1979 again when Rubstick won. And I remember standing at the first fence and I thought, you know, I've got to do that. I want to do that. I know my friends, you know, we're all working class lads from Liverpool. We're like, you know, you nuts, you can't do that. And I said, I'll show you I can do that. So I got myself a job in racing and worked at highly revered trainers such as Martin Pipes and Josh Giffords. Worked at Ginger McCain's when Red Rum was there, actually. So, you know, the dots are all getting connected here. And yeah, I had a few rides in the 80s. But because I was growing, I was getting bigger, and then I was doing all the silly things to make weight. I mean, I was 8.5 stone when I left school, and by the time I was 21, I was up to like 11 stone. So when I had my first ride, I had to ride at 10 stone, and I remember dropping like a stone in a week to do the weight, and I shouldn't have been anywhere near a horse. I don't know how I got it round. and that was over the jumps as well. So I remember, and so when I packed in racing after having a few spins, and I come back as an amateur for a while, and then I decided to get a proper job, so to speak, and got myself into academia. Ended up doing a doctorate, and my thesis was all on weight making with jockeys because I was so fascinated by what are the effects actually on your physical, mental, your performance of making weight and doing all those sorts of cultural sort of deleterious practices, you know.
Oh, fascinating. And you're encouraging to eat the sort of a high fibre, high protein, healthy diet, George, and not just cutting back on food, but you're encouraging jockeys to eat up to 5 times a day. Is that right?
Well, the two key things to this, Mike, are first and foremost, if you're in an energy deficit,
yeah.
In other words, if you're putting out more energy a day than you take in, you will reduce your body fat, okay? Because your body's got to make up the deficit, and it'll use fat stores to make up that deficit. And the second thing is to control your blood sugar. So, because we know if you're eating convenience foods, your blood sugar is going to rise quickly and fall quickly. You're going to get hungry again, and then you're going to go straight back to that packet of biscuits you've been eating. And again, you get those spikes of blood sugar. If you go back to a natural diet of eating sort of, if it grows on a tree, if it grows on the ground, or you can catch it, eat it, then if you follow that sort of mantra, you will be as lean as nature has intended you to be. And it was just using the science and using the nutrition and using, as I say, evidence-based, showing that if you're in an energy deficit, you can eat 5 times a day and still lose weight, and you're not hungry. You can also fuel yourself for the sport that you're doing, and in this case, it was racing, and also you're not dehydrated, because dehydration is a big no-no, you know.
Yeah, yeah, that's massive, isn't it? So you looked then, George, at the hydration status, you looked at their metabolic rate, body composition, I think all this involved to begin with. How shocked were you at your initial findings?
Well, Mike, we'd done short-term interventions where we'd actually sort of kept a hold of the jockeys in the sense that we made sure we knew what they were eating. We were getting their food diaries. We were actually, excuse me, sending them the food. And we done short-term diets that had worked. But we wanted to see what happens when you do something in a free living condition, so to speak.
Yeah.
Where the findings weren't that we weren't that sort of surprised by some of the findings because the short-term studies had worked. But what was the key thing here was when you give people advice and leave them to their own devices, the fact that over 5 years, the group of jockeys that stuck to this, which was 23 over 5 years, from initial of 47, to think that they've gone away and actually stuck to what we told them, following a high fibre, low carbohydrate, staying hydrated, eating 5-6 times a day, doing some exercise, that they would maintain that because obviously it was working and helping them make weight. That was the big, not a surprise, but that was the key finding, really, you know.
And George, there were 23 jockeys. Were they all flat jockeys, or did you have a number of jumps boys that came on board as well?
Yeah, well, as I say, Mike, I've done over 400 jockeys since 2009, flat jumps, male, female, professional, amateur. But on this particular study, it was 47 male flat jockeys. So the majority of jockeys that we get to see are male flat jockeys.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, the biggest issues we tend to have are with male flat jockeys. And it doesn't take a genius to work out. That's because the weights are so low. You've got bigger people, taller people, heavier people trying to do ridiculously culturally silly weights, you know. So there's an argument which is for a whole nother program about raising the weights, you know.
It's interesting because I saw the Racing Foundation press release which came out about this study of yours, and there were some great quotes from Franny Norton. Now, we all know Franny, you know, he's a fellow Scouser like yourself, George, and he's the right shape and make to be a jockey, isn't it? And I know he's turned north of 50 now. He said he's fitter now than he's ever been before because of this turnaround and the way he's taking in the right stuff, the right combination of food and nutrition.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Franny's been a fantastic conduit for us, Mike, for the jockeys, because he's so well respected in the weighing room. And likewise, you know, other jockeys such as, and I don't mind naming them because they've mentioned this on Twitter, the likes of Paul Mulrennan, absolutely fantastic conduits for us and the rest of the weighing room. I think it's really helped the fact that I rode myself. So I think you get a little bit of trust there. They think, you know, well, he's wore the boots, you know. And then you get, as I said, Paul and Franny, who actually were the first two jockeys to get involved in 2009 with my research. So I can't thank them. And the good thing is on this is that Paul, who would be a bigger jockey, a taller jockey, compared to Franny, who doesn't struggle with his weight so much, it shows that both of them have bought into it for slightly different reasons, because Franny just wants to feel better, be stronger, be the best he can be, and Paul because he wanted to control his weight better. So, you know, we've ticked the boxes for both those great characters in the weighing room and also great representatives. And on top of that, we've had ex-champion jockeys involved in the study. So, you know, we weren't just getting the apprentices here, and we were getting the people in the weighing room who the rest would look up to and go, well, if they can change, surely this is the way to go, you know? Yeah.
So, George, talk us through, if you would, talk us through the process. They come to see you, they go up to Liverpool John Moores at your laboratory up there. What happens next?
So, Mike, when they come in, what happens is they do a number of baseline tests, which includes a body scan called a DEXA scan. They'll get their, which gives us their body composition, most importantly, their fat mass. And also looks at their bone density as well, because we scan their hip and their lumbar spine to see how their bone density is. Then from that, we do a rest and metabolic rate test where they'll lie in a supine, lying down position for 20-25 minutes, and we get an approximation of how many calories a day they need just to live. Then on top of that, they'll do a fitness test, a VO2 max test, where they'll run to exhaustion on an incline, on a gradual incline on a treadmill. And from that, I can get a number of things, including not just their fitness, but also what's called their anaerobic threshold, or their break point, where they start burning solely fat. They stop burning fat and they solely burn sugar. And then from all this data, we look at the urine status as well to see the hydration. We look at their current diet, and then I do a bespoke, individualized program for each individual jockey. And with this 5-year study, the idea was that they came back annually to see if they were sticking to the advice we gave them and how their body composition and the other markers were getting on.
Yeah. And were they being disciplined about it enough for you, George, as far as you were concerned?
Well, Mike, the proof is in the pudding because, as I said, we had 47 in 2017 who started out. Then we had 27 come back after 1 year, and we found out a number of reasons why the jockeys didn't come back. And one of the key reasons was they were actually happy with their diets, and they said, it's working, I don't need to see you again. Okay, fine, no problem. So then that was the biggest reason. Then we had COVID hit, so we missed 2 years of testing. But then luckily again, we went tested again some 4 years later, and we got those 23 who stuck to it, and their baseline, their retest and their second tests, the changes were maintained between first retest and second retest. So that showed that they'd stuck to it. I mean, which is fantastic, because obviously we're changing the culture and we're changing behaviour, you know. Yeah,
indeed. So George, what's next as far as you're concerned with all this? The foundation, Racing Foundation, going to carry on funding your work? They mentioned this 5-year study. Is that now finished? Is that now completed?
Well, if you keep plugging them on the television, we might get some more money, Mike. So keep doing what you're doing. Might keep me in a job. Otherwise I'll be busking in Liverpool with my guitar. On a serious note, they've been fantastic. And obviously, we're sort of the unofficial centre of excellence up in Liverpool, John Moores University.
Yeah.
Because jockeys from all over the world come, and not just in the studies, but I work with the Australian Association and Hong Kong, Dubai, because obviously weight making is the same the world over, and the issues are the same. So we get jockeys from everywhere. So hopefully we can continue. But the next piece of research is to look at sort of the bone density of jockeys, because the scans would tend to suggest that the bone density of jockeys is quite low. And right. I'm actually going to find out if these scans are accurate, because we can actually now look at some bone fragments from injured jockeys, which I'm in the process of doing, and seeing if the actual scan, which is a non-invasive measure, actually ties up with an actual bone fragment, and if that bone fragment has been compromised from weight making, poor nutrition, etc. So that's the next thing to report. So that's going to be really fascinating, you know.
Oh right, and it is. It's important and essential, I would imagine, George. And will you get some backing for this very quickly? I've got to go to Sunderland Dogs.
Yeah, well, quickly, as I said, I think all the stakeholders are right behind us, and hopefully, I mean, we've got to keep it going, Mike. So programs like this really help. But thanks for the plug on all this. Yeah,
George, anything we do, it would be great. Listen, really lovely to chat to you and to meet you, at least on the television. All power to you, George. Many thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you.
And George is off to Aintree later in the week. Enjoy Aintree as well. He's going as in the posh seats, as he was saying. So we'll break off then. Dogs are at the trap.